Welcome to Monday's Mental Mistakes. This week we're looking at belief bias. Belief bias is the tendency to evaluate arguments based on how believable their conclusion is. That is, instead of focusing on the validity of the argument, we tend to focus on whether the conclusion accords with our beliefs. Belief bias makes us more likely to accept invalid arguments that have conclusions that we agree with. At the same time, we're unlikely to accept valid arguments that have conclusions we disagree with. Here's a simple example. Remember that a valid argument is simply one where the premises actually imply the conclusion. That is, if the premises are true, then the conclusion must be true. The premises of a valid argument may or may not be true themselves. So, validity only comes from the form of the argument. Consider the following arguments. Argument 1. Reliable car brands have better resale value, and that's an important consideration. Toyotas are pretty reliable since they have great resale value. Argument 2. Islamic theocracies have great human rights records, and that makes them attractive tourist destinations. Somalia must be an Islamic theocracy since they have a great human rights record. Are these arguments valid? That is, if their premises were true, would their conclusion also be true? If you found the first argument more compelling than the second, then congratulations, you suffer from belief bias like the rest of us. Both arguments actually have the same logical form, and both are invalid. But most of us can see the error in the second argument more readily than the first, since the statements in the first argument are more believable, and some of them are actually true. The principal way to counter belief bias is to become familiar with the laws of logic and deliberately apply them when considering a proposed argument. Belief bias is most likely when we are not giving sufficient attention to the structure of the argument, so countering it means taking a methodical approach when examining the argument. Some steps that can be useful is to paraphrase the argument, and particularly to write it formally using predicate calculus. Accurately transcribing the argument into a more formal or straightforward form will make the structure clear. Being unable to transcribe the argument into a more formal form is a sign that the argument is not well presented, and possibly fallacious. The essence of belief bias is a tendency to focus on the truth of the claims of an argument, rather than the structure of it. That is, we tend to evaluate whether a statement is true or false, rather than to assess whether the various statements are actually meaningfully related. For example, it's been shown that people have trouble seeing the flaws in an invalid argument if its premises and conclusion are true. Consider the argument. Premise 1. All US presidents live in the White House. Premise 2. Barack Obama lives in the White House. Conclusion. Therefore, Barack Obama is a US president. Here, all the statements are true, and so many people struggle to see that the argument is, in fact, invalid. In conclusion, belief bias is the tendency to evaluate an argument based on the believability of its conclusion. Until next week, may your mental mistakes be minor.